Norman Maturo,
Here.
Linda Schwartz, Don Colapetro,
Here.
Sam Vincent,
Here.
Rex Sims, Robert Bornstein, Anthony Resio.
Here. All right, today we're going to have a review of the following ordinances for the consistency with the City of Bonita Springs Comprehensive Plan. An ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, providing for adoption of a comprehensive plan amendment relating to the downtown redevelopment area, amending the future land use element and future land use map series, transportation, conservation, coastal management, housing, and capital improvement elements, providing for intent, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. Do we have any public comments? Awesome. Who wants to start with this?
Who wants to start? Oh,
So, yeah, we have Margaret on the screen.
Hi, Margaret.
Would you like to start?
Yes, yeah, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thanks for accommodating me virtually. So what I want to do today is introduce our team in the room. So Rosemary is here. Rosemary, raise your hand.
Hi,
I can
Margaret.
only see the committee, so I'm flying a little blind here. We also have Ken Gutterham with Gutterham and Associates. And so what I'd like to do today is cover the overview of the amendments that you have in front of you and give you a little context about what we've been up to. We were asked by council to look into kind of two separate buckets of amendments. So the first set of amendments are around the downtown and implementing the downtown vision. And then the second set of amendments, we were directed to look into the future land use element, the transportation element, housing element, a separate initiative to really reinforce kind of more how the transportation system was working in the city and do some updates with the future land use element, especially with annexation. So what I'm going to do today is separate those two discussions. The packet that you have is one packet, however, of amendments. And what we did is we color-coded the different, sort of the ones that were related to downtown, and then the ones that were related to the other updates. So the purpose for combining them in your packet is so that there wasn't sort of two sets of amendments that you had to look at. So it's color-coded. It should be pretty clear in your packet what's what. But I want to talk through kind of the logic about what the goal was and how we implemented that in the amendments. So first with downtown. So the downtown vision really was a response to where the city was moving at in terms of their form-based code. And the form-based code lives in the land development code. And at the same time, the comprehensive plan has to be consistent with land development code. So we were asked to look in how to make the changes in the comprehensive plan to also reflect where the form-based code was going. So the majority of the detail about downtown is in the land development code. It's not in the comprehensive. So, but the changes that were needed in the comprehensive plan were to really look into the vision for the downtown district, as well as to kind of reflect the updated names. So many name changes were made from the old 41 redevelopment overlay, or sometimes you'll see it old 41 overlay. Those were changed to downtown district. And at the same time, we also added a downtown district there's not an option there. And then the last big change was that we struck this previously unadopted transportation concurrency exception area. So the reason why that's kind of related to downtown is this old concurrency exception area, it was not an adopted policy. What it did is it said we would accept a failing level of traffic service, traffic
yet.
You guys have any questions down there?
Not yet.
Okay, we're
No
good.
questions at this time. I don't know if you could hear them.
Okay, great, I'll continue on. So then I want to move to the other updates of the comprehensive plan. So the first set was in the future land use element. And with the future land use element, we were asked to do several things. One is to update the element. So there are many maps in the future land use
I have one question. Can you hear me? This is Sam Vincent.
Margaret, can you hear Sam Vincent?
Nope, I didn't hear all that.
I have one question about the flood maps. I'd heard yesterday that, I think next year, that the FEMA elevation for finished floor slab will be raised 1 foot. Would these maps take that into account?
So the question was regarding the flood zone floodplain map, and Mr. Vincent heard last year that FEMA would be updating their map series and raise the BFE by a foot or so, and he's wondering if our flood zone floodplain map takes into account the most recent data and if that's reflected.
So our understanding is that the data that was provided is the most recent data. Now, I don't know in terms of any future updates to those maps. The floodplain manager for the city reviewed the map and verified that this was the most recent data that was available. I think that with any of these maps, when there are updates, when there's important policy considerations, that these maps continue to be updated in some kind of a reasonable, regular time frame. So Rosemary, you may have a little bit more information. Rosemary created most of the maps, so you may have a little bit more information in terms of the data source and the regularity of updates.
No, I think you covered it. This is the data used from the most recent FEMA publication, and the floodplain manager reviewed that. So if they come out with one next year, that's beyond what we have right now. But we have the most current data reflected.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. The acquisitions that are pending, what is the approximate cost of them? And what is the value of acquiring them for the city?
Margaret, did you catch that?
So, yes, I believe so. With the new annexations, annexed properties, those are properties that had previously been annexed. So they're not properties that are going to be annexed at this point. They had already been annexed into the city. So the important piece here is that the city be able to give those properties a future land use category, because then it gives the city the ability to control development and to develop policy based on those properties. So all of these that we're talking about have already been annexed.
So I'm not sure. Did I answer your question?
Not really.
Not really.
Um,
So the question was
Well,
really,
no, Mr.
Go on,
Bergson, is this about actual, the city acquiring, buying land or annexation? So the only lands that the city is contemplating now is we've identified areas in East Bonita which will be acquired for water quality purposes primarily.
For what purpose?
Water quality. The only piece that will have an additional stormwater component at this time is the piece known as Bonita 278. Now that is primarily a water quality project, but it will have an additional 3-foot berm built around it, which will allow us to store stormwater from Citrus Park, probably. That's the goal.
so the question was specifically referring to the cost of any acquisition, so, it
And
was,
the value.
and the value,
of
so,
that cost.
yeah, it was in addition to the, it wasn't
Derek,
really
is that the
paid for
property
annex
off of
plans.
Plantation? Where the golf course?
No, that's a different piece. The city is looking at that piece as well for water quality and stormwater mitigation, but it's in the planning stages only.
Thank you. That's it.
No other questions?
Vice Chairman, you got anything?
Okay, are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay, so the next piece is the transportation element. Similar to the future land use element, the goal was to provide a lot of updates. So there, again, you'll see in your packet many updates to the transportation element map series. Some of the examples here are the bike ped
go back?
Oh, Margaret? We have a question for the transportation element.
The intersection at the Beach Road and Old 41 seems to have an emphasis there to some kind of change. Is that going to be a major modification in that area? And the second question I have, all of the maps reflect the railroad, but I don't think there's any vision by any agency or any government agency to bring back railroad travel.
So there are two questions. The first one was pertaining to the intersection of Bonita Beach Road and Old 41. The question is, there's a marker that there's going to be a significant change there. What is the change exactly, and what is the extent of the change? And then the second question was that all of the maps reflect the rail, and it doesn't seem that there isn't a clear plan for improvements, and it doesn't seem like there's a consensus on what is going to happen with the rail, so why is it reflected?
So I'll take the Old 41 Bonita Beach Road intersection question first. So one of the maps that you see in that transportation element that we did not change, well, there's two there that really are important. One is the quadrant map, and these appear towards the end of the transportation element. So one is the quadrant map, and the other is the network zone map. So those maps we retained because we know in the future that the city is really working more on the network in the Old 41 Bonita Beach Road area. At the same time, because there had not been funding yet attached to that, we did not put it into the long-range transportation plan map for the city. So we know that that's a priority, and so that's why the network zone map and the quadrant map were retained, so that future planning could take place in those areas. But yet, because no funding had been attached specifically to that area, it doesn't appear on the city's long-range transportation plan map yet. Second question about the rail is the MTO, and this is just based on the networks that I keep and the information that I have from the work that I do, is that the MTO, from a long-range perspective, may want to preserve options for the rail, but it is correct that there's no plans yet for how to address the rail or whether to purchase that right of way. And so retaining it on the map, however, is important because it keeps it on top of the agenda. And when you look at the transportation element and the future land use element, there's reference to preserving that right of way. And that was several years ago. I want to say 2 or 3 years ago. That was a big initiative to at least get some policy language in the comprehensive plan about that rail, so that it was a placeholder. Maybe in the future there'll be grants for rail, or maybe other opportunities that the MPO may see from the state to purchase the rail or to more develop that. So it's kind of a holding. It's in a holding pattern. So keeping it on the map helps keep it in that status to take the advantage of the opportunity later.
I realize it goes much further than the cities, but it'd be a shame to lose that at some point. From Tampa down through even Miami, alleviates much of the road traffic.
I think there's a lot of interest in the rail, but I don't know that anybody has a way there yet.
Question here. I guess this is an overview of all of these elements. Will we today getting into any of these specifics that are listed here in the body of these documents?
The question is, understanding that this is an overview of the changes made, are we going to get into the specifics of the document itself today?
I was not going to get into specifics. However, if you have specific questions or comments, we would like to hear that.
Yeah, I think we go through the entire overview and then go back to whatever questions we might have highlighted when we reviewed this.
Okay, yeah, they would appreciate going through the specifics once we finish the overview
Okay,
and have
sounds
specific
good.
questions, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
So I'm almost done.
Oh, 1 second, Margaret.
one other thing on the rail, there's something's afoot because they've taken all of the cross arms down at every crossing.
Yeah,
They've all been dismantled.
one more thing with the rail is that it seems like something is going on because they've taken all of the crossing signs down.
They've actually
The arms as
taken
well.
them apart, yeah.
Crossing arms as well as safety arms. Really?
Yeah, the specifics of that, I don't know what the current status is with the rail. The rail owns where they cross the roads, so there may be something that CSX is doing.
Okay.
Okay.
I can add a little bit to that.
This housing,
Yeah, I just say that CSX has sold the underlying rail beds to Seminole Gulf Railway. So it's possible that they are planning upgrades or changes to those intersection improvements. If there's no, obviously, if they were just abandoning it, they wouldn't necessarily need to take them down. So my guess is this is tied to some kind of upgrade.
Did you catch that, Margaret?
Okay.
Yeah.
Since the rails do go through city, are they obligated to keep you informed?
No? Yeah, but it's maintaining them.
okay. So with the housing element, our review was to look into how any changes to the first two future land use and transportation elements would be affected. And upon the second review, we really didn't recommend any changes to the housing elements beyond what was done with downtown. So that's kind of a short story. You see very few changes to the housing element overall. And then the last couple slides I'll show you is just kind of the timeline about what we're thinking in terms of moving forward. So today is your meeting. We will be taking comments from your meeting and informing the council of your feedback on March 18th. And that will be the council transmittal hearing. And then following that, we have a tentative date of adoption of May 6th, at the May 6th meeting. So we're required to at least have 30 days for an expedited state review of these amendments. And so that 30 days is the waiting period between transmittal and adoption. The reason why it says tentative is the city actually has a longer, if they choose to use that time frame, they have more than 30 days. So at this point, we're anticipating May 6th, though we don't know for sure if that will be the end, or the actual date of adoption. So with that, we'll take questions and feedback. And if you have specific feedback, we can take those notes. And I know Rosemary in the room can probably hear a little bit better, so.
Yeah, I apologize. We normally have the mics out. We don't have them today yet. We'll make do.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
On the first page of the housing element, objective 1.2, housing conditions, says that there's 651 occupied housing units identified in the 2000 census as lacking plumbing facilities and/or overcrowded. 651? Where are they?
Did you catch all of that?
In terms of the update, we did not make updates to that kind of language because our direction was to update the housing element with perspective on how it affected, specifically how transportation affected housing. So that was not, that area was not updated.
But you're asking specifically where they are.
Yeah, I mean, it seems
What-
like
I
a
don't
lot.
think that question was answered.
Yeah, no, and I don't know if she can answer this, but he's trying to identify where exactly these
I know that, yeah.
651 homes are that don't have
And that's a,
plumbing.
That's a lot of
Very
homes.
pertinent question. Where are these
That was a good question.
really substandard areas?
Yeah, so the main question is, where are the 651?
if
Where
it's in
is
here-
the area of substandard housing?
I don't
Is
know
that-
if the city has that information, so John may help. I don't know if John can-
Should that be
John,
in,
it's
the?
coming up
Should
on-
that be in the document if you have no backup information? I mean,
John's coming up.
that's a significant statement, that you've got 651 units still somewhere around in Bonita Springs
Well,
that are
that, if,
slums.
if you read that objective, what it does is it references, and it's not with this, but it's with the information that was originally submitted in the city's first comprehensive plan. So this has not been updated since the original adoption. It states, eliminate or have improved to standard condition by the end of the planning period 10% of the 651 occupied housing units identified in the 2000 census as lacking plumbing facilities or in an overcrowded condition, and improve the structural and aesthetic condition of the existing housing stock. There were several, if you remember correctly, anybody that's been here since before 2000 remembers there were several trailer parks that have since faded and have either been purchased or have been transitioned to something else. There were houses, and I'm speaking from historical knowledge, not from referencing this specific data, but there were houses in the Rosemary area that probably fell into this definition. And since that time, there have been improvements made, both in terms of the trailer parks that were not to standard conditions and also to some of the single-family housing that was not to standard condition. This objective was talking about improving 10% within the first planning period, which is essentially 7 to 10 years. And while I think that was accomplished, because it's been several years since 2007, that somebody needs to go back and either amend that to reflect current situations or just simply remove it because it's been accomplished. So it's not current data. In fact, it's rather dated. It's over 2 decades old. And the backup analysis for it was provided with the original comprehensive plan. So it was listed and provided to the state. It's just not part of this transmittal. So I apologize for that.
But shouldn't that be changed?
Well, I agree. It should be changed, and it should have been changed in 2007. It probably should have been changed again. And
Reflected in a current proposal.
correct.
For the
Correct.
council to accept. I mean,
It makes,
this
it
damning
makes,
statement.
Well, in the defense of this particular document, when the presentation was made as to what should be included within this proposal, this objective was not part of it. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve to be. It just was not included as part of what the council had asked to see. But no, you're exactly right. The information is dated. I believe the policy, or the objective has been accomplished. We're now in a situation where they need to reflect current data as opposed to referencing something that happened 20 years ago.
yeah. Well,
Yes.
that makes more sense that way. I mean, I know at least 4 of the parks that were removed
Correct.
were definitely in the substandard
Yes.
range, so.
Yes. I mean, this data is old enough to buy a beer for, so.
Well, I was trying to be politically
Yeah,
correct.
I mean, make this change so that it's reflected in what is accepted by the council.
What I think we can do, and I haven't gone through the policies underneath this, is if you would all like to make a separate motion that says you would like to see something updated in this objective 1.2 of the housing element, we'll see if it can be done. What I don't want to do is remove that objective if it impacts the policies underneath it that are still needed.
But I think the present policies should be reflective of what's current.
Right, there is an issue here that we would have to, that you.
Not just that policy, but
Yeah, but there's an issue you've highlighted that needs to be addressed. We're not in a position to remove or update that policy language until we have the most readily available data analysis to support it. So what I actually would recommend is, although I think we obviously need to resolve this, is denoting that policy is based on data from a particular time and may need to be updated. Something to that effect, because we can't make changes to the comp plan unless we back that up with current data, and we don't have the current data. So leaving the bad data is not necessarily a good thing either, unless we can show everyone that that's based on the old data.
Before we leave that, we're about ready to go into another census, so if you wanted to recommend that we use the data from the 2020 census to update this objective, that would be
Or,
fine.
or
Don't
just
you
say
have
that
data
it will be
At that
updated.
time.
You have data from 2010, right?
I
If
would
we
hope
update it
so.
from the 2010 data, then I agree, it should have been done. It wasn't done. So if we update it with the 2010 data, we still will be a decade behind.
Right, I would say we go with the 2020.
To interject here briefly.
No,
Yes.
just kidding.
So the difficulty really in these amendments has always been that there's been a lot of public feedback that our amendments be very limited in their scope. So part of the direction that we had from council was to really limit our scope of the amendments to specifically, again, the focus was on making your transportation system work best and to updating the annexed properties. So we've had kind of some conflicting direction in some ways, is that, again, the public has been very focused on limited updates, and that was the direction that we had from council, is that we not go relitigate everything in each of these three elements, is that we stay very focused on those things that were impacted by annexation, map updates, or the transportation system. So again, it's frustrating for us when we can see that some changes will need to be made. And hopefully those things, if you make the recommendation, look in the future, these really need to be updated. I think that would help in terms of the next round of updates. I don't know if that's valuable input or information, but our scope's been pretty limited in terms of what we've been asked to do or allowed to do in some ways.
So,
Do we need to make a motion now then?
well, yeah, but what I say is, so if the problem is that if we're gonna get accused of mission creep by the council of changing things that they said not to change at this time, then I think John's original suggestion is that your recommendation to the council is that they also look at making this update as soon as possible.
Because you really have two different motions. You're going to evaluate the document in its entirety, then you'll have whatever particular changes that you happen to notice that they didn't see.
This is a very damning statement that shouldn't be there. But I'm sure there are other significant changes but this one I think is damning.
Well, and I think the city attorney outlined a pretty, I agree with that path forward, and simply state that when the new data comes out.
Are they still 600?
No.
So the answer is we don't know we don't think so, but we can't tell you exactly what that number is. That's the issue.
Yeah, it's not misinformation, but it's misleading currently.
Correct. And if you-
So you would have to say, you'd have to qualify this statement so as people don't get a misunderstanding of what you're saying here.
Don't put any numbers in, just.
Yeah. I have one more, I have a question from 114, as it talks about modular construction being allowed in different areas, residential areas. Will there be any architectural controls, aesthetic controls on these modular units as we move forward with that sort of thing?
under the current regulations that we have to operate, I don't believe we're going to be allowed to do that. I think we're basically looking at the modulars just being the modulars. I'll take a look at what the statute is to see if we've got any flexibility.
Right, because, with modulars, you can run into the same thing you do with trailers. You get that kind of look, and I know that before you develop something like that, you've got to get community involved in that, and whether or not land can be, I guess, zoned for that sort of use.
Well, what I think that this references is the fact that modular homes are treated the same as single family in terms of where they can be located, and they're not treated the same as mobile homes. And as a result, those single-family districts allow for modular construction. I don't know within that statute if it allows us to apply architectural standards or not, but I'll take a look.
Yeah, because we don't do that now with single-family homes anyway.
Correct.
No architectural guidelines for that.
And the statute generally directs governments to treat them the same way.
But when you look at, if you're doing one or two of these, it might be okay, but if you do these in groups, now you're starting to impact the visual and aesthetic natures of different areas of town. and that would be my concern, is that en masse, you know, how is it making an impact? Negative, or really on the negative side.
Any other questions? We're good.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
One more question, sorry. Under, let's see, under affordable housing, objective 1.3, or 1.32, it says the city may include a provision for cash contribution to a housing trust fund dedicated to provisions of housing for low and very low-income households. Where would that money go? How would it be monitored?
Well, I think that we might want to hold off on modifying this, because when we start looking at affordable housing and financial contributions and what developers are entitled to, there have been changes in state regulations since this was passed. So before we dip our toe into that water, we might want to take a step back, because this is a much bigger picture than just a couple of policies.
That's what I would think too, because you're starting to say who's monitoring this trust fund, you know, where, you know, things like
This references back when we had the Bonita Springs Housing Authority.
Yeah, okay.
And there was a program that was administered through that
Gotcha.
authority.
Gotcha. Thank you, John.
Any
We're
other
all set.
specifics? No? All right, Margaret, I think that's it for now. That's the plan.
In housing, yes.
In housing.
Yes.
Okay,
Conservation coastal? What's
so
next?
if there's other comments
I
on,
think they
or
got it.
questions about the other elements?
Yeah, I think there's gonna be more.
I think I had one in transportation where,
Yeah, I did.
let's see, won't you go with yours while I'm finding mine?
Yeah, I transportation also.
Yeah, a few in transportation we'll take.
In regard to the new development at the end of Bonita Grand, I don't know what the name of it is, the old mine area.
Okay.
What is the vision for the transportation down Bonita Grand and down Terry? Once that construction starts, is there a concept of widening the Terry Road and Bonita Grand, et cetera?
The answer at this time is no. The city does not desire to widen either Terry Street or Bonita Grand. There was some discussion about widening Bonita Grand to 4 lanes. That is not a road that's owned by the city, it's controlled by the county. The crossing of Terry Street across I-4 has an estimated cost in excess of $40 million.
Say I-4?
I'm sorry, I-75, excess of $40 million, which is I-4 type money. So, you know, at this point, basically, even the city's position is not to encourage high levels of development in East Bonita, but even if it did, we're never going to get the kind of cost sharing to make that happen. So we're hoping that our other transportation improvements and improvements that FDOT are making down at Bonita Beach Road stuff will lighten up traffic, but our goal at this time is to keep those fairly rural roads.
But following that concept, how are those 2 roads, which are presently 1 lane each way, really not well maintained, going to handle major construction traffic?
John's got a wink on his eye. He wants to say something.
Right now, what we're thinking about as part of the transportation plan and identifying improvements as we go forward, the idea would be if there were improvements made, it would look more like Logan Road as opposed to Imperial Parkway in terms of that divided 2-lane road right now. That's the current thinking. Those plans have not been drawn up. There's nothing more solidified other than that thought and that reflection on the map. City attorney identified it perfectly. The plan is not to build a robust grid out east because we are not looking to encourage development in that area. We are going to try to accommodate the development that will take place, but we're not looking to promote that area for additional housing units.
I understand that, but something's going to occur in that area. and there's gonna be 750 homes, give or take. There's gonna be park area, et cetera, and so forth. And I don't know the timetable, but from what I'm led to believe, it's starting within the next year or so.
That might be a little aggressive.
Yeah.
Next 2 years, I don't care.
That still might be a-
Within a reasonable short period of time. How is that road structure gonna be handling major pieces of equipment?
Well, God willing, we let the construction take place before we make a lot of improvements.
Yeah, we are in the process of trying to acquire some of those right-of-ways as part of that deal. Additionally, there are some other commercial projects and residential projects further south that are moving forward. So until we have a better idea what all of East Bonita is going to look like, and we are trying to find out what that is as soon as possible, because that will allow us to make the infrastructure improvements and plan for it. We're trying not to plan something that will, if you build it, they will come. We're trying to figure out what is reasonable out there and then redesign according to that.
What I'm not hearing, and I asked this in other areas, what I'm not hearing is there another route that could be used that would circumvent that particular area? And I think the only one is through the, what's the name of the park there?
The Edison Farms.
Townsville. I know they won't allow major construction vehicles to go through there. Is there something in the back, or even could a construction road at some point in time be created to take that traffic off of the Terry?
You are asking very good questions, and probably not the right hearing. We can talk about the historical impact of these past decisions further.
This is a plan for this area.
Correct, and what we have done is we have incorporated a lot of what the city is doing and what the city would like the people like the MPO or Lee County DOT to reflect in their plans. When we start talking about roadways that connect multi-jurisdictions and counties, obviously we're not the only players in that game, and as such, there's a lot of people that have a lot of opinions that go into those locations and those connections. So,
Can I also add something here too, John?
yes.
Is that the MPO right now is doing its long-range transportation plan for 2045. And so the plan that you see in front of you is the most recent data and analysis that we have. And so because you're going to see some development as the MPO does their long-range transportation plan and as the city also develops its next capital improvements program. So these, the maps that you see in the plan you see is the sort of what's currently on the books. And so I think as, again, good feedback, I think from the LPA may be to continue to update these maps as they develop. Because part of the challenge, again, is the maps that we're updated haven't been updated in many years. And so having more regular updates with some of these map series may be helpful. So I hope, and maybe this is some feedback that the LPA may want to give, is not wait 20 years before the maps are updated again in the comprehensive plan.
Good point. I have a different question here. It comes from policy 111-1, and it talks about minimizing single occupancy automobile travel. Typically, that's associated with an interstate, but are we suggesting something within our city that would limit single family or single occupant automobile travel?
HOV, huh?
Did you catch that?
I did not.
So this was a little, so correct me if I repeat this incorrectly, but which policy was it? It was
111-1.
111-1, policy 111-1, that's referring to single occupancy vehicles. Is that suggesting something about how those are going to be treated within the city that's not already expressed?
Right, that's good.
111-1.
Yes, 111-1, single occupancy.
There.
looking at including other such appropriate alternatives to minimize single occupancy automobile travel. The city may promote alternative facilities or programs to address transportation needs. But one person in a car on an interstate probably, I've seen that. That's in Miami and just about everywhere. But is this intended to address local traffic?
No, I think it's supposed to be a little more general than that. I think what it's recognizing is the fact that we're, especially at the time that the policy was written, we're a growing city, and there's only so many opportunities for new roadway locations. So the more people you can fit into a vehicle, as opposed to all of us driving our cars to the same restaurant for lunch, if we all rode together, that reduces the number of vehicles on the road, which allows more capacity to be there, or at least does not exceed capacity by more than it needs to.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. However,
It just encourages carpooling.
Correct, and it's supposed to be
Well,
general.
you make a reference to carpooling.
should, I have a single
People
person.
going to work. and-
Right, person office, so what you're suggesting is that I call somebody and say, I gotta go to lunch, would you go with me?
I don't know if it's that. I think it's more people going to work, probably. Yeah, in the
well-
same office.
We're a community here that deals with an automobile and a person per automobile. How are you gonna get people who work in different offices to do that? I mean, carpooling in a small community like this, I don't know if it works well, but that's being talked about, right?
If my memory serves, and it serves me poor and poor every year, but what I remember is the general nature of this policy is to encourage multiple people within a single vehicle, whether that's a bus or a monorail or carpooling, or whatever it happens to be, without going into some sort of a mandate stating that you have to have 3 people in a vehicle
Yeah,
to
that's
go anywhere,
my
because that's not the point, and that's not the intention. But the goal there is, if you're going, so if there's 2 or 3 people in your office and you're all going to the same place for lunch, why don't you think about riding together? That's about as far as I think it's looking.
As long as it's encouraged, if there's no mandate.
I
probably fine.
I cannot see a world in which that would be a mandate or a mandate would be accepted.
Margaret, do you have something to add?
I do. So carpooling, so if you looked earlier in the transportation element, there's mention of the transportation strategies, and it specifically mentions carpooling and employer-focused kind of programs for carpooling. So that's sort of the more general approach citywide. So this downtown district policy is really just associated with what you're looking at for the downtown specifically. So carpooling is something that earlier in the element citywide is kind of on the agenda. So I think we addressed it more generally in the city, which makes sense.
Would you agree that carpooling is indicative of large businesses, meaning that you've got over 100 people, so working in one business, that would be conducive with that volume of people working in one building? However, if you have a lot of small businesses around town, and it's always been one person in a car going to work or going home, it doesn't apply there as effectively.
Did you catch that? Would you agree that carpooling in general is more appropriate for like an FTE above 100 or a larger volume business, whereas carpooling for a small business is maybe a little harder to attain and not as appropriate?
I think that carpooling anywhere really can be incentivized, right? So, none of these policies about carpooling in terms of when you look at the earlier part of the element, they're not required. And so, I think that it's an and approach. And I think the previous part of the policy really does focus on larger employers. But there may be options for the city later on down the road to incentivize carpooling anywhere. But I think that is correct, is that it makes sense with larger employers as well.
I think it's in keeping with all of this environmental concerns and greening and all that kind of stuff, to just encourage this. There's no way you can force them, but have a policy to say, it's a good idea if you're carpool. Simple. Go play golf, 3 guys, 4 guys, go in
Yeah,
one
I
car.
don't disagree with that at all.
Is there any way we can mandate that Derek and John carpool? Saves the money.
Can I go back to the
We're gonna
transportation?
ride together to the next planning meeting?
In the transportation element, 133 and 134, you made some changes or modifications which stress safety. On Bonita Beach Road, on east side of 75, at some point in time within the near future, there'll be probably 10,000 residents in that section of Bonita Springs. And I know that that's owned by the county or the state, I forgot which one, the road, actually,
It's split in half, right? No,
county and state, or?
county out there, Bonita Beach Road, east of I-75.
Part of it's county, part of it's city, part of it's private.
Okay. My concern is and there's a significant portion of that which is inhabited by residents of Hispanic background, whether they be legal or illegal is irrelevant. But it's a dangerous site because of the lack of either sidewalks in that general area, or most particularly lighting in that particular area. The new Logan roundabout has made a difference for that one little section with the overhead lighting, which is good lighting. But there is still a whole section that's not lit. I know it's not the city's responsibility for most of that area, but are there conversations with the city and the state/county to do something about that? If you're changing and modifying the transportation element to reflect safety, I think that's a significant portion, especially since, 10,000 out of the 50,000 permanent residents will be in that section.
I don't know if there's been specific conversations, but I know the city has a street light advisory committee that looks for new locations to light and how much it's gonna cost and how they operate and what they do. And I don't know if they've identified this area or not.
As a member of that committee.
Oh, well then you are well aware of the fact.
And it's been something I've been pushing for a year.
Mhm.
And I have been in conversations or attempted conversations with state and county employees. I have literally been placed on hold for an hour. I have been cut off. I have gotten nowhere. I have asked the deputy manager, Matt, who tries to help me, and I became almost like a pain in the neck. But I think it's a significant concern for that area, and I wish somebody would do something, most particularly since you're reflecting concern for safety.
Can I add something here? Is that a lot of these policies, when they're large and general in nature, right? You don't see specifics in them, but what it does is it signals to other agencies that this is important to the city. And so the importance is for example, the Metropolitan Planning Organization and the Florida Department of Transportation, they have safety initiatives, and this may allow for increased safety funding. And so, again, sort of adding these policies in help to support the city's position about the importance of these things, and ultimately may attract more funding for those kinds of improvements. So that's our goal in adding in some of these amendments to the transportation element.
Have future land use element, housing. I have a question in the future land use element portion. Policy 1111, the downtown district. And it has to do with implementing a vision for the downtown area. And I don't know how many people on this board know what form-based code is. It has several elements to it. One is architecture, which is my concern. But, Margaret, could you talk about the form-based code just a little bit to tell us what that's about a little bit? Because we're looking to implement that vision.
Did you catch that
No, 1111.
1111, the downtown vision and the future land use element, the,
Yes.
the reference, yeah.
Right, so the idea here is that because there's a lot of education around form-based code, that the form-based code is anticipated to be heard by the city at the same time on the 18th. At the same time, this comprehensive plan will be heard. So there'll be a presentation by EPZ, and the form-based code will be available, and I believe the first hearing at that same time. So a lot of the education and specifics about form-based code, how it will look for the downtowns in the city, is going to appear there. And so, I don't know if that completely answers your question, but I think the idea is to move those along at the same time so that there's clarity about what the form-based code says. I would like for them to be considered together because in terms of putting it in the future land use element, we need to have a form-based code that is clear what it does.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's helpful or not.
I
If
under-
I even answered your question.
Yes, I understand that it's just for the downtown district right now. So that'll be discussed at the May 2nd meeting for the council?
Did you catch?
Should be. It's not February.
That's correct. May 2nd?
March 18th.
March 18th. Okay, that'll be discussed at that point.
Yeah, and actually, our previous presentation to council overlapped with the form-based code presentation that day as well, so that they're being talked about in conjunction with each other.
I think, our concern is the comprehensive plan and how that impacts the comprehensive plan or vice versa. So that'd be a good meeting for us to be at to see, because it's basically a zoning alternative with components, architecture being one of them. So I guess it's not appropriate venue for that right now. Yeah, I think you understand my viewpoint on form-based code. That's the architectural side of it. So, with that, I'm done.
I think we're good.
Okay, on the future land use element,
Yes, that's everybody's cue.
and any other questions about transportation?
Nope.
Housing, capital improvement? Going once, okay. I think that concludes our questions. Margaret?
So, is there any desire, I think, on the LTA part to make some recommendations about how these elements in the future are updated, or do you have feedback on any of the Cherry Street sub-district? I think those are pretty detailed and,
I think we need to somehow word this, that housing conditions needs to be upgraded, I guess to the 2020 census would be the practical, but as soon as possible, because, and I understand where the numbers come from, but it's correct, but it ain't right. So we got to fix that.
Good, thank you.
Yes. Were you able to catch all that,
Second.
Margaret?
I think so, yes.
I think that's it.
Okay, that is it.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. I'll stay on if you're going to entertain a motion, or I'll stay on till.
Yeah, we'll need a motion to approve it with the updating of the, using the 2020 census for the housing conditions.
If the chair would, I got two notes from the discussions that reflecting updates. One is in the housing element to recommend that the council look to updating the information on the housing, and also the affordable housing to look at what the impact and new regulation and state mandates are. That was the other one I got. So both update related.
Yes.
Okay. With that being said, I make a motion to approve it with those two variations.
Yes, see, that's second.
So he seconded.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Well, Derek, can I ask you a question? It's a stupid question. It says,
cameras
non-residential uses shall be limited to a maximum floor area of 1.2 what? 1.2, what does that mean?
Where are you?
What the floor area ratio, 1.2?
Yeah.
I'll ask one of the planners to explain 1.2. I can only do it when there's
Just
no
say
fractions.
1.2 square feet or meters or something? I mean,
It's based on the site.
well, I
So
don't
give them
understand.
like the 10,000.
Basically 120% of the gross area of the lot. So the total property times 120%, that's the maximum square footage you could build. Now, you still have to build it within the setbacks, you still have to meet
So
maximum height.
it's of the acreage.
Well, it is whatever,
Total property.
whatever it is. So if you had a 10,000 square foot lot,
Right.
you
can
could
go to
build
12.
12,000 square feet with the setbacks, but you'd go up.
That was actually going to be the example I used, but I was second guessing my math.
Is that,
I was worried too.
John, is
I
that-
just thought it should say something.
is that also covered under, you can only have a minimum, what is it, maximum, minimum, 45%
That's lot
lot
coverage.
coverage, and they are up to 58%, right? That 1.2 would fit in that,
It would be one of the standards you would have to fit that 1.2 within. Like I
Within?
said, you can have that 12,000 square feet of building within the property, but that 12,000 square feet has to meet the setbacks, has to meet the height, has to be below the maximum lot coverage, has to be able to provide parking, water management, all the things that go along with it.
does FAR cover all floors, or is it just?
Yes, all floors. And it only covers non-residential uses. Residential uses are covered under density.
It's a zoning issue, right?
Well, it's a comprehensive plan issue that zoning must comply with.
Thank you. Thanks again, so we're all set with that.
She does a great job, by the way, of interpreting those questions.
Can you say that again, Margaret?
I said I was gonna stop the presentation if that's it for me.
Yep.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
It was excellent.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, public comments, I
Any,
guess.
Yep.
any public comments on that? No public comments, fantastic.
What is number 2 here?
An ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, providing for adoption of a comprehensive plan amendment to amend the future land use element and future land use map series, transportation element and transportation map series, and housing, providing for intent, providing for severability, providing for an effective date. Who's taking the lead on that one?
That's the one we just did.
Okay.
That's it, huh?
That-
So you're done.
Yeah, they're both pretty much the same.
Okay, I had to read it anyways. Wait. Good one, John. Thank you. Before we go, a couple things that I have to cover. I was told, I don't know how accurate it is, that the governor is going to ban public meetings. It's coming. However, for the interest of the safety of the board, until further notice, we're going to suspend our meetings. We're going to work with John, and when we have a group of important information that we have to meet on, we may call a meeting, but check your emails because you'll be notified via email. But this is going to be our last meeting for now.
So when we have the next meeting, there will not be any carpooling.
No, please don't carpool. Thank you. Good point.
I'll come pick you all up in the motorhome.
We will hold in the parking lot, we eat you in your vehicles.
We can't, we don't have approval of the minutes. We don't have them, but we will have them, so it's no biggie. And thank you, everyone, and stay COVID-19 free. I'm going to another meeting on that after this. Thank you. We're adjourned.